60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome to the BIA Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. Excited to have you here. It is Friday, the day before the game. Nebraska coming to town. We're going to be talking with Sean Callahan of Husker Online here in a second. And in the second block, we'll be talking to Joseph Hastings about Ohio State recruiting with a big Buckeye Bash coming up this weekend. An unofficial visit weekend, if you will, for Ohio State recruits. But, you know, we're sitting here less than 24 hours away from the start of the season. It felt like it was never going to get here. Really, if it wasn't for Ohio State and for their week one opponent, Nebraska, it may have never gotten here, to be quite honest. Two of the most vocal teams out there. You know, we can also lump Iowa in there to a certain extent, but it was really Ohio State and Nebraska arm in arm, fighting to get a season out there. And what is their reward? They get to play each other in week one. And with that, let's bring in Sean Callahan, the publisher of Husker Online, and talk a little bit about Ohio State's week one opponent. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin, it's great to be on, and I'm just excited to have football. I'm excited to see you later tonight and grabbing a steak at one of the finest establishments there in Columbus. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to talk to you more here when I get into town.
Yeah, a couple of Manhattans in me, and I'm sure I'll give away all the state secrets at that point. But it's good. We're not to give an unofficial plug to Jeff Ruby, but we'll be at Jeff Ruby. Probably the best steak that I've had in my life, though, was on my trip to Nebraska last year, and I went to Mahogany Prime, another free plug, and had maybe the most ridiculous steak ever. So I can assure you this is not the way that Rivals.com publisher life normally is, going out and having a big steak, but there's something to celebrate. Football is back.
Yeah, we've waited this long, so here we go, and I'm just excited. You know, it's just such a weird feeling still. You know, I've given 3 public speeches this week around the state and done my regular in-season routine this week, and, you know, it felt kind of strange just getting back on the horse and doing it because it's been 12 weeks of just nothing as far as August to now. And I think there's just such a cautious approach from everybody because Kevin Warren pulled the rug out one time, and, you know, there's some pretty stringent testing protocols that every team's going to have to play and follow. And I think until teams are on those planes Friday, I just think a lot of people are going to be uneasy until we know that, you know, the ball gets in the air and we play a game on Saturday.
You and I, we talk a lot. We're friends outside of work as well, but we talked a lot during this whole saga to bring the Big Ten back as we were covering it. I mean, just out of everything you've done in your professional career, how strange, how odd, how out of the box was this whole process to you?
Well, I was involved in the Big 12 breakup back in 2010, and that was crazy in its own right as far as Dan Beebe in Texas, you know, Nebraska, Colorado, Texas A&M, and Missouri leaving the Big 12 because of the Longhorn Network and that drama that brought. But I think this was 10 times more drama-filled because of all the different layers of it. You had Kevin Warren, you had Nebraska, you had Ohio State, you had the player parents going outside the Chicago Big Ten offices and running protests. And, I mean, just all these things that have happened. It's going to be – I joked before we had football back, the only good thing that's going to come out of this is I didn't think we were going to be playing, but the only good thing that might come out of this is the 30 for 30. It's going to be a hell of a story if somebody can get access to those Zoom links of some of those meetings that went on with coaches, ADs, Kevin Warren, et cetera, behind the scenes, because it was quite an ass show behind the scenes. I mean, there was a lot of drama, a lot of BS to get to this point, but I'm just glad we're here because it is the right decision. The Big Ten was going to set itself back for many, many years perceptionally as a league if they weren't going to play football this year.
Yeah, I agree 1,000% there. I mean, as it is, there's still going to be a lot of ground to cover in terms of this, and they've left themselves no safety net whatsoever. This 8+1 model, 9 games over 9 weeks. We see games being postponed. We see games being canceled. There's really no room for maneuvering short of a situation of there being major cancellations throughout the Power Five and them having to make a move as drastic as potentially, moving the college football playoff back a week or two. Because I think once you let the genie out of the bottle and you have everybody playing, and we won't be to that point until the 7th of November when the Pac-12 finally gets on board. But once you get there, you see these dollars, and it's hard not to grab at them as you sit there and you see athletic programs that are going to have 90, 100, $130 million shortfalls.
Yeah, and I think, best case, that normal Big Ten payout is about $55 million. And, I think they're probably projecting about 40 is what they're going to get, and there's no ticket revenue in there. And that's a questionable move as well, because I think they could have done it with fans, even if Ohio State just said just 10,000 fans, but we're going to really make these tickets expensive. There'd be 10,000 Ohio State fans that would pay double the money to be one of the 10,000 in there. There'd be 10,000 Nebraska fans. So that is really hurting these schools.
Yeah,
ticket revenue.
Yeah.
And I agree, though. I understand what's going on in the Midwest, particularly. I mean, we're getting the late COVID push that the South and Florida and Texas and Arizona had. We've kind of been 2 months behind. So, yeah, right now I understand, you can't have the big tailgates and what we're used to having. But I still wish there was a way that they could include a minimal number of fans in there. I mean, they're doing it right now in Major League Baseball for the World Series. We know the SEC. We know the Big 12 is doing it, the ACC. So I felt like there's a way they could have made something happen. But, I just think the best analogy I've heard was from Nebraska's Chancellor Ronnie Green. I mean, you look at the Big Ten, it goes from the border of Wyoming all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. That's a lot of different political views on COVID-19 from the Wyoming border to the Atlantic Ocean. And there was just no way that they were going to ever get on the same page as the league as far as the fan issue goes. And I don't think they wanted to be an advantage, because Nebraska, Ohio State, Penn State, I'm not going to say Michigan because I don't think they would have had fans, but Iowa, there probably would have been 4 Big Ten teams that really could have had an advantage with fans, and then the other ones would have had no fans.
And, I at risk of I don't want to make this all about necessarily the return to football, but I agree with you on that. And of course, then it's a situation of, well, if we don't get to have fans, why do you get to have fans, and so on and so forth. And I know that there's been a lot of talk potentially of the door is not closed and we can revisit things as we go along. But I truly believe that sometimes once the plane is taken off, it's really difficult to start working on the engines at 30,000 feet. But, moving on to Nebraska specifically, and I think a reason why a lot of people are listening to the show today, once again, this is the BIA Podcast, and I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Sean Callahan. How do you compare this Nebraska team that, you haven't had the benefit of seeing spring practice, you haven't had the benefit of a lot of normality? Just from that 30,000 foot view that I spoke of a minute ago, how does this one compare or contrast against maybe Scott Frost's previous teams?
Yeah, 2018, there was a lot of moments where you're like, wow, this team sets up well for 2020. But then 2019 happened, and Nebraska, they really lost 3 games they shouldn't have lost. They should have beat Indiana. They should have beaten possibly Iowa, definitely Colorado. And they should have won at Purdue. But Nebraska was a 5-win team that easily should have and could have been an 8-9 win team last year. And that just soured so many people's views on the season. I mean, they blew a 17-0 lead at Colorado, a 14-3 lead against Indiana, and a 10-0 lead at Purdue. And, Iowa, they had the ball at midfield tied to win the game instead of a field goal, and they lost that game. So, yes, they were a 5-win team a year ago, but the line was so thin for them to be, an 8-9 win team that would probably be playing in one of those Florida January 1 bowl games. and they didn't go to a bowl for the second. Actually, you go back to Mike Riley, the third year in a row. But this year, I was looking at the numbers, and there are 7 players on Nebraska's offense that were in key or starting roles on the same field in Columbus 3 years ago. So this offense has been together a long time. They have their entire line back. Their tight ends are back. The quarterback's back. Receivers have been overhauled. That's been a different position than Dedrick Mills is a newer running back from, that started to come on last year. He had 198 rushing yards against Wisconsin, and we know what kind of defense Wisconsin has. So they have the potential to be pretty dang good on offense, but there's such a cautious approach about saying that because of last season. And we don't know what Adrian Martinez is going to show up. Is it the one that went into Columbus as a freshman and played a game where, he had Ohio State really into the fourth quarter? Or is it the one that, struggled in Lincoln against Ohio State where the game was over literally in about 5 minutes? So that's the hard thing to get a feel for. Defensively, there's a lot to replace from a year ago. 4 of their key guys they lost are on NFL active 53-man rosters, 3 on the D-line and 1 at corner. So they've got a whole new defensive line. That's going to be interesting. They've got 6 kids or 7 guys. They're going to play the 3 spots, rotating them in. They're pretty good, though, on the back 7. They've got their inside linebackers all back. Their entire secondary, all but 1 guy's back. The outside linebacker position, though, in the 3-4, that's where they've really had problems, and they fired the coach last year that coached OLBs and special teams, which were the worst units on the field for the Huskers, and they've really tried to take a different approach. So it's just so hard to get a feel because of the schedule Nebraska's going to have. They very well could be much better than a year ago, but it's going to be hard to measure because they're playing 5 of their 8 games against ranked teams.
And you talked about the quarterback position and Adrian Martinez, and earlier this week, Scott Frost came out and announced that Adrian Martinez would be the starter, locked in a position battle with Luke McCaffrey. How much of it really was a position battle? How much of it, in your opinion, was a motivational thing? Just how close was that? And as the old saying goes, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. Is this going to be a situation of where we're going to see a couple of quarterbacks? And I'm not saying if, one guy is not getting it done that they go to the bullpen and bring somebody else in the rest of the way. Could you see a situation of where it's kind of a series by series type of thing?
No, you won't see a designed rotation. I can tell you that with pretty high level of confidence. But what you will see, I think, are possibly designed packages for Luke McCaffrey where he could come in and run certain deals, but also a much shorter leash from Martinez. If Martinez is struggling and Nebraska's down 21-0, I think they're going to be more apt to go to McCaffrey in that situation, where a year ago that wasn't an option. McCaffrey, they really struggled to keep him at 4 games. They wanted to keep him at 4 games. So, and then he battled a minor injury. And they also had Noah Vedral last year, who's now Rutgers starting quarterback. I mean, their quarterback depth has been outstanding here. Just to have multiple Big Ten starters on the team last year. So managing it last year was tough because Martinez had a knee injury and a shoulder injury that bothered him, and he just wasn't right. Then mentally he wasn't right. They had a new center last year, Cam Jurgens, who had never played center, never played O-line, but he was like a rival top 250 tight end that grew into a center position, and his snaps were just missiles that would go over his head really high all the time, to the point where Martinez was he had the snap yips where he'd jump up and down and think every snap was going to go high, and it wasn't high, and his timing, his footwork was thrown off. It just, the whole rhythm of the offense was a problem last year, and that's the key. If they can get that back, I think people forget how good of an offensive coach Scott Frost is, but they've got to get the rhythm back that they once had. 2018. I mean, this is an offense that they've played Illinois, I think in two games against Lovie Smith, Scott Frost has put up 1,200 yards of offense on them. So, I think that's what you got to look at, what they can be, but a lot of it is getting that rhythm back.
We've talked a lot about the offensive side of the ball, and I'll bring in a pretty general question about the defensive side of the ball. we haven't necessarily seen the black shirts of old. And it seems that defense, at least from somebody who's outside of covering Nebraska, I watch them from afar. I went through their schedule last year. I mean, 31, 37, 38 here, so on and so forth. It doesn't sound like things are necessarily going to instantly be rectified week one, replacing 3 on the D-line in a 3-4 scheme and a guy who's on a 53-man roster from the secondary. What's the deal with the defense? Why has it been such a struggle for the Huskers to find their footing on that side of the ball?
I think a few things. Depth has been a problem. I mean, we get access, Kevin, to Pro Football Focus, as you know, every week. One of the more interesting things you get now are those snap counts, and it really lets you know how much Nebraska was playing their key defensive players than other teams in the league. I mean, Nebraska might be playing some of their key guys 60, 70 snaps on defense, if not more. And, Iowa's and Ohio State's are able to keep that at like 40. And I just think that makes a difference. Like, you go back to 2018, Nebraska played 3 very good quarters at Ohio State, but they ran out of gas in the fourth quarter, and they just could not stop J.K. Dobbins in the run game late, and they just kind of leaned on Nebraska and won that game and finished them out. And that was a lot of it was depth. Wisconsin was the same way. They've played Wisconsin fairly tough, but they run out of gas in the fourth quarter. Iowa, same way. So they've got to get depth where they can roll in more guys, especially when you play an offense like Scott Frost plays. Because if you're going to go tempo, you're going to play more snaps on defense too, and they've got to be deeper in that area. Then the other thing, Kevin, this is just football 101. They've got to get the quarterback to the 4-man rush again, and they have not been able to do that very well the last several years. You go back to the last time they've really been able to do it was Randy Gregory was at Nebraska. And in his 2 years, he was the leader in the Big Ten in sacks. And Ohio State knows what that's like. When you have Chase Young or the Bosa's, you can get the quarterback to 3. And you can drop 8 in coverage, 7 in coverage. And Nebraska has had a blitz. They've not blitzed well. And so a lot of the problems have, just not having some of the personnel, the depth, and the pass rushers that you need to win in this league.
You're listening to the BIA Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Sean Callahan. I want to really thank you for being part of the show today. Last question I have, and for those of you who are looking for Sean's pick on the upcoming Ohio State-Nebraska game, we have it over at BuckeyeGrove.com. It is in our 5 questions piece, and if you're not a member of Buckeye Grove at this time, act quickly. We have our best flash sale going on right now. You can get your first year of Buckeye Grove for just $12. Use code OSU12, and that deal expires at the end of Friday. But my last question is, what is the season outlook for Nebraska? Without getting too deep into it, 5 ranked teams on the schedule. You guys start against Ohio State. Certainly no favors coming out of the league office in terms of the schedule, but the West really does seem to be wide open. Graham Mertz has to step in for Jack Cohn at Wisconsin. Minnesota had good news when Rashad Bateman opted back in, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be something where Wisconsin has been anointed by everybody as the de facto favorite. Nobody else has a chance. What does this season hold in store for Nebraska?
Yeah, I think anywhere from a 3 to a 5 win is kind of the barometer right now. A 3 is the low end. The first 4 games, Nebraska plays the top 3 teams in the conference. Ohio State, Wisconsin, and then game 4 is Penn State. They go to Northwestern. So it's the toughest 4-game opening stretch in the nation for any team, in my opinion. And how they come out of that, if they can somehow find a 2-2, all of a sudden, then it's going to look pretty interesting in the final 4 or 5 games for Nebraska when you count that Week 9 game. But if they're 0-4, 1-3 out of the first 4, it just tightens up the pressure even that much more down the stretch for Nebraska. But I think they have the potential to be a 5-win type team with this schedule. I think Iowa is very beatable. I want to see Wisconsin without Jonathan Taylor, without Seifkis, and the other kick returner guy that they lost, Crookshanks, he left there too. I mean, I get it. Wisconsin reloads. They do it every year. But Jonathan Taylor, Crookshanks, and Cephas, and Jack Cohn, those are some pretty big guys they don't have right now. And just to assume that they can reload that kind of skill talent as well, I want to see with my own eyes. I know their defense is going to be outstanding. Teams like Minnesota and Purdue, I question how much they've done this offseason. They were two of the ones banging the drum to play this winter dome schedule. I don't think their teams are going to be quite as sharp or prepared maybe as Ohio State and Nebraska. Nebraska trained and done things since March and April. They kept players stayed around here and did stuff. I don't think Minnesota was like that. TJ Fleck held a press conference praising Kevin Warren for canceling the season back in August. So you're telling me they're going to be the same? I just don't think the Gophers will be the same team. In fact, I'll eat crow on this. I think Michigan will handle Minnesota week 1. That's my hot take for you. And I'm sure your listeners will they probably won't like that one because they don't want to see Michigan handle anybody.
Yeah, exactly. They want to see them go into the Ohio State game with no wins. It's not a matter of, we want them to be as high as possible and then, only to take it away from them. That's not how it operates. But I want to thank you for taking the time, spending 20 minutes with us here on the BIA podcast, and I'm looking forward to having dinner with you later tonight and seeing some football this weekend. So, thanks again for being part of the show.
Hey, thank you, Kevin, and we'll see you later tonight.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everybody for listening so far. We're going to take a quick break here, and on the opposite side of it, we will talk to Joseph Hastings about Ohio State's recruiting. Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HagueH2O.com. Welcome back to the BIA Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I want to thank Sean Callahan for joining us in the first segment. And now we're going to shift gears to recruiting. And I want to bring in Joseph Hastings here in a second, our excellent recruiting writer here at BuckeyeGrove.com. As you know, we are still in a dead period, and that really has put a crimp in a lot of recruiting plans for a lot of programs. No official visits, no unofficial visits, nothing until at least January 1. And, if I were a betting man, I think that could even go on a little bit longer, but still a big event going on, just not under the direction of Ohio State. But let me bring in Joseph Hastings and let him kind of explain what is going on with something called Buckeye Bash. Joseph.
Hello, Kevin. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. It's great to have some recruiting news to talk about that's really tangible. You and Andy Anders have done a great job so far in terms of navigating some uncharted waters in terms of recruiting. But this is the first real event that I think that you guys can sink your teeth into, and you've been all over this. So why don't you kind of explain your understanding of what's going on?
Absolutely. So the Buckeye Bash is essentially going to be an event organized by Ohio State's commits. Obviously, as you mentioned before, we are in the midst of an unprecedented dead period, so no football personnel will be allowed to interact with any of the commits or have face-to-face contact with them. So it's essentially going to be a bonding experience for the 2021 pledges, the ones that can make it up to Columbus for the weekend. They're going to spend some time at Jack Sawyer's house. Some commits are going to even spend the night at his house on October 24th. That's the main day for the event, which makes sense because that's when Ohio State opens their season against Nebraska. Obviously Ohio State is at 20 commits. They really don't have a ton of targets left, so we weren't expecting this to be something similar to the Sooner Summit or the Tiger Turnout, which was hosted by Oklahoma and LSU's commits, because they had way more targets than Ohio State does at this juncture. But there will be a couple of key visitors in attendance for the event, but this is mainly going to be a bonding experience for those 2021 pledges. These guys have been really interacting with one another, mainly through text message. Some of them have seen each other face to face, but this will be the first time that all of them will be able to interact with one another in one setting.
So just to make sure that everybody understands this is not university sanctioned because they can't do that. these guys aren't getting tickets to the game because of the way that Big Ten rules are in terms of there are going to be 600 tickets available to current players and staffers to have with their families. So this is not a game visit weekend in terms of being in the stadium. There's not going to be any campus tours. There's not going to be any interaction with staff or coaches or recruiting assistants or anything. This is something that is 100% player generated, operated, the full nine. This is separate and away from anything that would be coming out of Mark Pantoni's recruiting office.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting because this could set a pretty cool precedent in terms of commits for a program, not just Ohio State, LSU, or Oklahoma, just commits in general for different programs organizing these type of summits on their own where they get to hang out with one another outside of the coaches, because obviously they want to be able to interact with the coaching staff, see who they're going to be coached by for the next few years, but they also want to know who their teammates are and get to know them on a more personal level. So it'll be interesting to see if this kind of presents the opportunity for commits in the future to do similar types of events. But yes, this is not university sanctioned. This is completely done by Ohio State's commits, starting with Jack Sawyer. Jack Sawyer and his father, they're the main ones organizing this. So yes, absolutely, this is completely separate of Ryan Day's program.
Just wanted to make sure that we're clear on there. While I know that most of the people who are listening to this BIA podcast are Ohio State fans, I don't want there to be any gotchas out there thinking that Ohio State is trying to skirt the rules or anything. But you talked about some visitors that could be here in terms of non-committed guys. And I'm going to start with Tristan Leigh, the big offensive lineman out of Virginia. And he is expected to attend, and obviously that would be a huge visit. He has a younger brother, Aiden, who I believe is class of 23 as well. What would it mean for Ohio State, for a guy that, a lot of people have said LSU or Oklahoma? I mean, Ohio State certainly is very much in the mix, but in a lot of ways it's kind of felt like maybe just another hat on the table. But if they're able to make this trip on their own dime, that speaks volumes, right?
Absolutely, and people who have read my columns, my 321s, and my pieces on Tristan Leigh know that I've been saying for the past couple of weeks that Tristan Leigh's recruitment has been very interesting. We've seen Clemson go from the team that was viewed as the favorite to then LSU being viewed as a favorite, and now Oklahoma is gaining a lot of momentum. So, in my opinion, based off the way his recruitment has progressed and the way that it's gone about, he's someone who's really open to seeing different schools and potentially having new schools at the top of his leaderboard. And I don't believe anything is set in stone with his recruitment in terms of Oklahoma being the definitive team to beat for him at this time. And I think, it's really important that Ohio State shows out this season, which I believe they will do, and puts on a good display, makes the college football playoffs, because we've seen LSU and Oklahoma, the two teams viewed as the favorite to land Tristan Leigh, struggled this season. So maybe he looks at Ohio State and they, go into a better light for him. But, going back to your question, this visit is a huge visit for not only him, but for his mother, who should be in attendance as well, and his younger brother, Aiden, who received an offer from the Buckeyes back in the summer. Tristan hasn't visited Ohio State since last November when he was in attendance for a game. So it's been nearly a year since he's been up there. And then also the fact that he'll be around a lot of the commits. I don't think it'll necessarily kind of pressure him into, committing to the program. I'm not expecting him to join forces with the Buckeyes after this weekend, but it would certainly be a huge visit considering the fact that, there's a current dead period. He's supposed to commit in early January. We don't know yet. His mother told me they were aiming for the All-American Bowl on January 2nd, but with that being canceled, it kind of remains to be seen if that would change or not. But with just over 2 months to go until his recruitment ends, him being able to get on Ohio State's campus for such a big event that will feature a lot of commits, that's huge. You can't, if you're Ryan Day's staff, I know they're not going to be able to interact with him or anything like that, but they definitely would be glad that he's able to get up to Columbus this weekend if he does.
Another name I want to mention is Derrick Davis out of Monroeville, which is Pittsburgh, more or less, Pennsylvania. And you've been all over this one for a while. About 2 weeks ago, I believe, you came out and said that he was definitely a target to show up It appears that he's supposed to be in attendance. I think a lot of people had written him off to Penn State. If I remember correctly, he's been talking about like a November 7th announcement date. So he sets a date there. I think a lot of people were just like, all right, it's going to be Penn State. And lo and behold, he's coming out to visit Ohio State. So if he does, in fact, make the trip as we're expecting, is that just, in your opinion, to see, okay, I just want one final look to make sure that I'm cool with it being Penn State, or do you think Ohio State really has a puncher's chance here?
Okay, so this one is really interesting. I was writing up my 3-2-1 today with the assumption that Davis was going to be going to Georgia, which was his initial plans. Now, that got changed, but the mindset that I had was that Georgia could be a potential dark horse. He gets down to Athens. He loves it. They've been recruiting him hard. Maybe they can get into the mix. But now that visit isn't happening and he's going to Ohio State and made a late switch like that, I don't think people should underestimate how big of a news this is. We have to understand Davis's dad, Derrick Davis Sr., was born in Cleveland. He's from Ohio. The family has ties to Ohio. And I spoke with his father, and he told me that they've been to Ohio State almost as many times as they've been to Penn State. So, they've been multiple times on campus. They know what the campus is like. So the fact that they're taking time out of their day, their weekend to go out to Ohio State, to go out to Columbus for this event, I think that's huge news for the Buckeyes. And that's why I haven't really submitted a prediction in favor of Penn State just yet. I know the overwhelming Rivals Future Cast predictions have him going to the Nittany Lions, but I've always thought Ohio State was closer in this one than most expected. And Adam Friedman, who's excellent, he works with Rivals as a recruiting analyst. He's been in touch with the Davis family for a long time. He has yet to submit a future cast on Davis's page as well. So I think there's room for Ohio State to make a push here. Obviously it's going to be kind of up to the commits in this particular situation to kind of impress him and to kind of guide him to the Buckeyes. But yes, I think this is a huge visit, and I don't think they're going to be just a hat on the table. I think Ohio State has a legitimate chance at landing Davis.
Yeah, currently I have my future cast in for Penn State. I think I just went along with everybody at that point, but I'll be watching this one closely, and I'll be ready to jump and change it if warranted. A couple more guys that I think Ohio State was hoping to get in. It doesn't appear necessarily that is going to be the case. The talented duo out of the state of Washington, Emeka Egbuka, and then, forgive me, I'm sure I pronounced JT's last name differently every single time I talk about it. Tui Alamolo, or I don't know. I'm as Ohio State does a better job recruiting the Polynesian kids, I've got to get better at that. But this isn't about me. This is about these kids. This is about Ohio State's recruiting class. There was hope of getting them to visit, but as you and I talked about before we went to air, it's a long trip to go from Washington State to Columbus, Ohio, and that's something that Ohio State's still going to have to deal with if they're going to eventually land their signatures on National Signing Day one way or the other. But, this isn't a case of where Ohio State fans should be like, well, that ship has sailed. If we can't get them out there for this, remember, this is the most unofficial of unofficial visits there are.
I completely agree. And we've talked about the impacts of the dead period, and there have been a lot of them. But when it comes to 2021 recruiting, specifically Ohio State 2021 recruiting, Emeka Egbuka and JT Tuimoloau, those are the two ones that you really have to figure they had the most impact on them just because of how far they are away from Columbus, over 2,000 miles away. It would be a long trip for them to go out there and get to the campus. So, starting with Emeka, obviously he's not going to be in attendance for the event or not expected to be in attendance for the event. And I don't think that's necessarily a slight or anything like that. His father told me that, he informed Emeka, we've been to Ohio State twice. You went to Ohio State twice in 2019. We're in the midst of a dead period. And those were kind of the reasoning behind him not going to Ohio State this weekend. Plus, he didn't go to the Sooner Summit as well, which was a few weeks ago. So it's not like Egbuka is, going to a Sooner Summit or is going to visit Clemson or something like that. is not opting to go visit Ohio State. He's just, at this point, his father told me he's focused on training, working through his online school, and hopefully he'll have an opportunity to take visits, which seems a little bit unlikely, as we've talked about before, but, hopefully they do get a chance to take their officials before they sign. As for JT, he has a top 7, but he is someone who doesn't take visits, isn't really out there in the public eye too much. But, going out to Columbus this weekend would have been a tough trip under normal circumstances, but with everything going on and how it would be an unofficial visit, it's not too much of a surprise that he's probably not going to be in attendance. The question now remains is, when are they going to get on campus? Because it's not like either of them are playing for their football teams right now, because the state of Washington doesn't have high school football going on. So it's not like they have football team obligations. So, the big question for me would be, when would they get on campus? Would Emeka prioritize a school like Oklahoma or Clemson more, just because he went to Ohio State twice last year? What about JT? How would he conduct his trip? So that's what I'm more interested in. But for Ohio State fans, I really wouldn't worry about them not making the trip this weekend. Derrick Davis and Tristan Leigh, obviously, those two are closer to Ohio State. They're closer to Columbus. So it makes sense that they'll be in attendance. But, yeah, no worries for Emeka and JT not making it this weekend.
This really seems like a 2021-centric event. I mean, Ohio State already has 6 commits for 2022. They have a different ringleader for that class. It really seems like C.J. Hicks is kind of the main guy in terms of the recruit turning into the recruiter. But is that your understanding? Is that your feeling of this event too, that this is really kind of a 21 event?
Yes, that's been everything that I've gathered. I've messaged a number of 2022 recruits, just seeing if they were going to be in attendance for the event. And they all told me they never heard of it. They didn't know that there was going to be something going on this weekend. I actually messaged Mary Rice, the mother of 5-star offensive tackle Zach Rice, who, she said she never heard of it, but said that, they'd be looking into going into Columbus this weekend, considering the event that's happening. But, other than that, it looks like it's just going to be all 2021 recruits. They're going to be the ones that are going to be there. It's going to be, primarily consisting of the commits. Someone like Travion Henderson, this is important for, because he's never actually visited Ohio State. He was supposed to before making a decision, but obviously the pandemic hit and then he wasn't able to. But he'll be spending 2 nights there from October 23rd to October 25th. So he'll get a full opportunity to soak in Columbus, kind of check out the campus. So that would be a good trip for him. But yes, it's mainly 2021. All of the commits, and then potentially Tristan Leigh and Derrick Davis as well.
I'm going to ask you more of a question that, it's not a the light switch is on or the light switch is off type of question, but, it seems like of the 2 guys that are supposed to be here that are not committed, they're guys that could write their ticket anywhere. And we know that fans kind of get a little nervous when, guys come on the visit and don't immediately commit and pledge their everlasting love to Ohio State and get a big block O tattooed on their back or anything like that. But let's say Leigh and Davis both show and they both leave uncommitted at that point. Should fans be nervous or salty or anything about that? Or is this, or should they, maybe have a little perspective in terms of, these are guys that were going to take it to December or January anyway. So just because this isn't being done in the end of October doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yes, and for some perspective and context, Tristan Leigh was in attendance for the Sooner Summit, didn't commit to Oklahoma after that event. He was also in attendance for the Tiger Turnout, visited LSU the following weekend too, and didn't commit. So if he doesn't commit to Ohio State this weekend, it wouldn't necessarily be a surprise. As I mentioned before, his mother told me they were shooting for a January 2nd decision commitment date. So, he's probably going to drag this on just a little bit longer, maybe wait to see how each of the schools in his top 5 pursue him, and then also how they perform on the football field. As for Derrick Davis, you mentioned it before. He has a commitment date for November 7th. That's kind of been locked in, for about a week now. Although we were initially expecting for it to be either November 13th or the 14th, but he seems pretty set on that date. So yes, if none of them, both of them don't commit if they visit this weekend, there definitely shouldn't be any concerns there about Ohio State's chances with them, because it would honestly be a really big shock to everyone if they do end up committing. Now, if it was an event that featured some 2022 commits, maybe favoring Ohio State, and they didn't commit, then there would be some questions. But with these two guys, they seem pretty dead set on when they want to commit. So I'm not expecting them to wrap up their recruitments right after the event.
You're listening to the BIA Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by our great recruiting analyst, Joseph Hastings. And I want to kind of double back to something that you talked about, and we didn't even necessarily prepare for this, but you're so on it. I know that you. I'm not going to throw a curveball at you. You mentioned about the All-American game in San Antonio being canceled this year due to some of the health concerns out there and everything else, and that really was going to be quite the gathering of Ohio State commits or whatnot. You know, what is your take on that type of situation? I mean, I don't know, was it going to be 12, 13 type of guys that were supposed to be there? I mean, obviously those games don't necessarily present the greatest football game in terms of execution. You put together a team that gets to practice for like 4 days and then tell them to go out there, and you know, it's more of a chance of them getting to bond, and now you're having a chance for a lot of these guys getting to bond under the backdrop of this Buckeye Bash. But you know, just your thoughts on the cancellation of that game. We've not heard anything about the Under Armour game at this point, so I don't want to speculate on the other All-Star game.
Yeah, as for the bonding experience, like you mentioned before, they're going to be having that during the Buckeye Bash. It would have been nice for them to get it during in San Antonio on January 2nd and the week leading up to it. But you know, a lot of them will be enrolling early at Ohio State anyway, so they'll be having an opportunity to hang out with one another like less than a week or just over a week after that event concludes anyways. But I think the biggest thing that the cancellation of the All-American Bowl impacts is obviously the players committed to them, whether Ohio State or other commits that were pledged to play in this game. It's been a lifelong dream for them, so you definitely feel for them. Even though it's a kind of an exhibition game, it's not high-intensity football that you're used to seeing. It's an opportunity for them to showcase their talents on the national stage, for them to be on NBC, for them to present their talents in front of their family members and to show everyone what they're made of. Also, I think it can't be understated, but it's a big opportunity for players to get a boost in their rankings as well. You know, you look at a guy like Jordan Hancock, who's outside of the Rivals 100. I was thinking with a solid performance in the senior season and then also in San Antonio, maybe he creeps into the Rivals 100. A guy like Marvin Harrison, who dropped from number 42 in the country to number 120. Maybe he could creep back into the Rivals 100 as well. And then Jaden Ballard, someone who he a wide receiver commit for Ohio State, someone who really isn't on the national stage, isn't too well known outside of Ohio and Buckeye Nation. I thought that would have been a great opportunity for him to display his skill set out there too. So you really feel for those guys, and I think that's where the impact really is the most. But it's not anything detrimental in terms of, you know, like that bonding experience you were mentioning about. But yes, you certainly feel for the commits who are pledged to play in that game.
And I just want to remind everybody, if you want the opportunity to get all of Joseph's great insights, we are running a tremendous flash sale that ends tonight. It is our OSU 12 flash sale. You get your first year of Buckeye Grove on an annual subscription for just $12, regularly $99.95. If you want to take advantage of that, be sure to check out the site and click the link on our flash sale or use code OSU12 to get your first year for $12. That is as great of a deal as we run. I wish we could run it longer than just the 3 days it's been going on. And with this podcast airing on Friday and the deal ending Friday night, not a lot of time to act, but get on board and be able to be part of everything. But I want to end this discussion with just talking about maybe a general question. And I get asked this a lot. And not necessarily about the numbers. Everybody's like, well, how many kids are they going to take? Well, I think the days of just assuming every class is going to fill itself to either 25 or going and counting the scholarship chart and saying, well, they only have 17 spots. The 17 spot class always ends up turning into 23 or 24. But you're in your first year of covering Ohio State recruiting at length. What are kind of some of your overwhelming thoughts on this class that they put together so far, and just how much they could expand it if a couple of things go right in terms of some of the kids that we've talked about here during our 20-some minute conversation?
So, I think this is an excellent class that Ohio State has put together, and it's the reason why they could potentially earn their first number one class in the Rivals.com era. You have someone in Kyle McCord who I believe is going to earn his fifth star down the line. He's been putting up monster numbers this year. You have a solid duo at wide receiver with Jaden Ballard and Marvin Harrison. Also, with the running back group, it's probably the best running back commit group that I've seen in a while with Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor. I think those two do a lot of things differently, but they complement each other really well. As for the offensive line, it could use some improvement. I know you have five-star Donovan Jackson committed and Ben Chrisman as well, but they missed out on J.C. Latham. They missed out on Jogger Burton, who committed to Kentucky, and Tristan Leigh isn't trending to the school. So offensive line recruiting will definitely need to pick up. I also like what they have at linebacker, Reed Carrico and Jalen Johnson, who I wrote in my latest 3-2-1. I believe he's put up good enough numbers and has done well enough this season for LaSalle to potentially earn his fourth star, either in the next recruiting update or in the final one. As for defensive tackle, the big storyline will obviously be that they couldn't get Tywone Malone, but it really wasn't the football team, the football staff doing it. It was mainly because the baseball coaching staff didn't pursue him as hard as some of the other schools in his top six. But I like what they have in Michael Hall and Tyleek Williams. Obviously, Jack Sawyer is a stud, and if you get JT Tuimoloau to go opposite of him, that's going to be probably the best defensive end class put together, I would say in the past 5 years, with those two, how dominant they are rushing the passer. And as for defensive backs, they were able to, I'm calling it a flip. They essentially flipped Jordan Hancock from Clemson. It wasn't a direct flip, but, he decommitted, then committed to Ohio State shortly after. But, he's a great pickup for them as well. And along with Ja'Kalen Johnson, who's the number one cornerback in Rivals, this is a really solid class that Ohio State has put together. To put the cherry on top and to add even more cake to that cake, though, I think adding someone like Tristan Leigh, just beefs it up even more. He's probably the biggest need in terms of remaining targets in this class, in my opinion. Some would argue JT Tuimoloau. I would say they're 1A and 1B, but Emeka Egbuka would be icing on the cake for the program, considering, the wide receivers they've hauled in recently. And then also Derrick Davis, too. If you're able to add someone that versatile who can play safety, who can play that hybrid safety, hybrid linebacker position, those would be some fantastic additions. But as of right now, I really like Ohio State's class. If it ended today, it'd be, fantastic. But they're looking at 2 or 3 more guys. So I see this class kind of finishing at 22, 23 and being the number one class in the nation.
And there you have it. It sounds like it's going to be quite the class. They've already got quite the class in. Of course, you got to get them all signed. I guess we'll see between now and December if they do go forward with an early signing period that happens before any visits could have occurred. I'm not going to speculate what the NC2A is going to do on that front, but it's going to be nip and tuck with Alabama, and you just wonder if a third or fourth team gets into the mix there. But Ohio State definitely trending to get above 3,000 points once again in the Rivals recruiting team rankings, which is always a sign of a really, really good class according to the stars. But ultimately, the rankings that matter most are the ones that Ryan Day and the coaching staff have, going out there and getting the kids that they really want. And, I'm going to wrap things up here with Joseph. Any closing thoughts you have? Any topic we didn't talk about? Any points that you really want to hammer home? I turn the floor over to you for one final shot before we call it a show and get ready for some Big Ten football on Saturday afternoon.
Yes, that was going to be my final thoughts right there. I'm really excited to, be a part of, Buckeye Grove and, to be a part of the first game covering Nebraska here from a distance, but it's going to be exciting to watch the Buckeyes take the field and to cover the team this year, and then also cover their recruiting efforts and be a part of that. So I'm really excited about what they can do. They were so close to making it to the championship game last year. I think they're gonna be in a really good position again this year as well. So I'm definitely excited to be a part of Buckeye Grove, and yeah, take advantage of that $12 deal. It's a fantastic one. That's my final message.
So Joseph took the words right out of my mouth about that OSU 12 promo. I'll be sure to link it in the description, both on SoundCloud as well as YouTube. The deal ends on Friday night. I don't think I can get it extended, so don't be left out. You can see all of my crazy tweets I put out about it. It's a really good deal. But I want to thank Joseph for being part of the show, just as much as I want to thank Sean Callahan for being part of block number 1. This has been a jam-packed edition of the BIA Podcast. We will do this all over again right after the Ohio State and Nebraska game with some post-game thoughts. I'll probably have Griffin Strom on, but we'll see what happens after the game. And then, of course, we will return to our usual three times a week schedule, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But once again, I want to thank you for listening to the BIA Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and we will talk to you very soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.